On today's episode, we interviewed Sarah Dusek, the co-founder of a company called Under Canvas, which is focused on glamping, which went on to sell for over $100 million. Today, she's focused on venture capitalism and focusing on really getting more women exposure to entrepreneurialism and all of the things of that. So, Casey, what were some of your takeaways from today's conversation?
Yeah, I think we all can think bigger, right? I mean, as we look at ourselves and say, "Hey, I've got this idea, I've got this concept," it's always going back to like thinking bigger. And so for her to take a concept of taking, well, by the way, it's amazing, beautiful tents, making camping a lot more fun, but to be able to then take that to over $100 million, I would have never ever imagined that that could have happened.
No, and I agree. I mean, I think it was definitely impressive, right? I think they kind of stumbled into it, and like she said herself, I mean, initially it was like, "Hey, how do we maybe make 100, $200,000 and just have a good quality of life?" Right? And really kind of stumbling into the idea, having some adversity, right? She kind of talked about the storm, and then learning to build it up from there. And she kind of told the story of, after that first year, that person's like, "Are you going to try this again?" And she's like, "Yes," right? And they continued on, and ultimately, made a big exit that they probably weren't expecting up front. And so super fascinating story, and I think she dives in a lot on just some of the, adversity that you face as a woman, right? And what kind of her mission is today and how really making that exit gave her the impact to be able to go on and help educate more women into the space.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely getting the book. I have a tremendous amount of
Called Thinking Bigger.
thinking bigger. I have a strong, my family's full of powerful women, and these are things that she's communicating to. We need more women in entrepreneurship. We need more women buying companies, and we really saw that at our conference. So I'm a huge supporter, and I think it's just pretty fantastic what she's doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I mean, lots of golden nuggets in this one. So listen in. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, guys. Thank
Great
you.
to have you, Sarah.
Glad to have you. So, Sarah, we kind of went over a little bit of your background, but you want to get to share to the audience a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started in this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an entrepreneur, and I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I did never imagine that I would build a company. I would never imagined becoming an investor, and never imagined that I would grow and scale a big company. So I started my career working for nonprofit organizations, and I thought of capitalism as the dark side. Making money was definitely, the Darth Vader side of the universe. But transitioned in in the middle of the great financial crash, of course, which is the perfect time to start thinking about starting a business in the middle of a recession
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
greatest financial crash of our lifetime, my lifetime up to that point, seemed the perfect segue for transitioning into pioneering a new business. And I ended up building a company called Under Canvas, which is the largest glamping company in the States currently,
Wow.
and built and grew and scaled that business for a decade before transitioning to becoming an investor. And now transitioning again to going back to entrepreneurship and building another travel company whilst remaining an investor.
All right. So there's a lot there. So let's go ahead and just dive right in, right? Because I think I have about a million questions. So maybe the first question, I mean, so obviously you were in the nonprofit mindset, right?
Yeah.
The kind of the financial crisis happens. What led to actually deciding to start a bit? Did you get laid off, I guess, from the charity? Let's start there. Or what was the trigger that led you to think?
Experienced burnout actually.
Okay.
I had been working overseas for aid organizations for about 8 years and really hit a wall. Was very burned out, very exhausted, very tired, and not in good physical, mental shape, which meant I ended up with about a year of being off work, effectively being off work sick, which really made me think I probably can't go back to doing what I've been doing for the last, 8 years,
Mhm.
which caused sort of a crisis, personal crisis, which, in the great hero's story, every great story has a great moment of crisis. And that was my great moment of crisis, really. I'm really questioning, what am I going to do with my life? And what do I care about? And what do I want? And what matters? And that really made me do a big soul search. And I was quite distressed because I loved the work that I did, but I was frustrated with not being able to drive enough change. I wanted to see, like most people who care, I wanted to see us solve problems. Wanted to see people's lives being better. I wanted to make, much more progress. And the conclusion I eventually came to was, aid agencies are not set up to be big problem solvers, but that businesses are. I mean, the very root of why a business exists, right, is to solve a problem. That's what a
Absolutely.
business does. It innovates to solve a problem. It creates a solution to that problem. The solution has to be sustainable because you have to keep making money. Otherwise, the business is going to fail. And so what I realized was, gosh, business is an amazing vehicle. And business has the potential to solve great problems in our world. It has the possibility for driving change, the moving us forward, creating innovation. And that really was the beginning of my journey into just, understanding and grappling with business and thinking what might that look like for me? I want to solve big problems in the world. How am I going to do that? And so that ultimately meant I got into a different vehicle and started to discover what being in business might look like as opposed to working for a nonprofit organization.
So in that, it looks like, so talk to us about that. So you've made that shift. How did the glamping, like, how did that become
What
the
was that
idea?
first? Because you did it the hard way, right? We always talk about buying something and then building it up, and you started from
Yes.
scratch. And so, what was
I
that?
started from scratch, yeah.
Yeah,
And before our glamping company, we started a different business, which we started from scratch, which failed because of the great financial crash that sort of rolled around. But then we got up and started all over again and said, okay, let's go again. Let's figure it out. What's gonna be more robust? What's gonna work? A bit like when COVID rolled around, there were a lot of businesses that went out of business, right? Because they just couldn't withstand, the climate of a recession and terrible economic times and people being stuck in their homes. I mean, it's pretty challenging. So we had to go back to the drawing board. I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out a new plan. And for my sins, I married this amazing Montanan man. And he took me out, as you can tell from my accent, I am not from Montana.
you
But,
had me fooled on that one.
I married this amazing guy, who I'm still married to, who was from Montana. And he took us as a family. We picked ourselves up from being in the UK, where I am from, and moved back to the wilds of the Montana prairie. And that's when it hit me. It's like there was so much synergy. I started my career in Africa as an aid worker here, and Montana and Africa have a lot in common. Big, wide open spaces, huge amounts of wildlife, extraordinary vistas, amazing sunsets. I mean, it's beautiful. If you haven't been to Montana, there's a big plug for Montana.
Oh, it's a beautiful state. Not to go on a tangent. Have you seen Yellowstone?
Of course I
I feel like
have.
the whole company has been exposed to Montana because of Yellowstone. So, great. For
Exactly.
those that haven't
Yeah.
seen the show, I think it's a great show. They're working on that last season, which apparently has all sorts of drama with the actors. But I think I
Yeah.
mean, I used to live in Seattle, Washington, so I've been to Montana a few times. I've been to Yellowstone Park, and so I think that's given
Exactly.
exposure more recently for the country. Just kind of what is Montana like?
Can't
Exactly.
believe
And
I've
when
never
we
been.
started our business in Yellowstone, our first glamping destination was in Yellowstone. We
Okay,
could have done with a bit of Kevin Costner. We really could have.
yeah. Well, you married the real Kevin Costner, so we'll just leave it at that.
There
There's
you
a
go,
plug for
I
him.
exactly.
married the real Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
There we go. Yes, I did. So we moved back to Montana and just we're starting to think about, oh wow, this connection with Africa, Montana, and couldn't quite figure it out, but there was some kind of like soul piece of the puzzle with like these two places have a vibe. And so we decided to recreate the safari experience, which became our glamping company ultimately. That was the genesis of the idea. Could we reimagine the safari experience for an American audience, but somehow connecting beautiful places, incredible vistas, and the amazing outdoors that the US has, and somehow bringing beautiful tents into the mix. So that was the original idea.
Got it. So then the first one you landed on, Yellowstone Park, is kind of that.
Yellowstone.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
were right
walk us
there.
through, just walk, just the kind of just walk us through the beginning of that, right? Did you go find a piece of land? What were you looking to invest? What were you looking to make? Right. It was in your mind, okay, if we make 200,000 a year, I'm happy kind of thing. And we're going to go try to
Yeah,
do it off this one or two locations,
yeah.
or, from
That
the
would have
get-go, were
been
you
like, I was
thinking,
an aid worker. So if someone said to me, you could make $200,000 a year, I'd have been like, wow, I've hit the jackpot.
Sarah, you weren't thinking bigger? All right. There's a plug for your book. We'll talk
That's
about that a
not.
little bit later.
Exactly.
We really were not. And we did not originally, the concept wasn't born in Yellowstone, but we opened our first proper glamping camp in Yellowstone. But we originally started on my husband's family's farm, with this idea of creating a farm sort of wildlife prairie experience for very high end sort of paying customers to come out to the prairie. And so that basically didn't work, which meant that we had to, adjust the idea, pivot the idea, which was then, where we came up with the idea of, well, let's take the concept's good. We knew that people were loving the concept. They just weren't loving where we were doing the
The
concept.
destination.
No, destination wasn't a destination. So we picked up our beautiful tents that my husband had designed, and we started over again, this time in Yellowstone. And yes, we leased land originally in Yellowstone from an amazing landowner, and literally set up camp in just outside of West Yellowstone.
God, and how many acres did y'all lease? And how much did y'all kind of invest, I guess, all in? And how big were these first tents as well? Just to kind of give the audience perspective, right? Like, what is the experience you delivered? That's kind of maybe the three questions in one.
Yeah, we leased 10 acres initially when we first started, and we put up 25 safari style tents. So they all had big, bed and chest of drawers and, nice chairs and a bathroom. Some of the tents had nice
Wow.
bathrooms.
So this is an
and,
experience.
wood stove. Yeah, I mean, not like camping in any way. Really posh camping. Camping done for you
Yeah.
in a very nice way. But our first version of the business was obviously, much more rustic and much more simple than it is today. But it was
It's the creative way to say a little bit more budget. But for the people,
a
we're going
lot
for a
more
rustic
budget.
experience.
Let's just say that there was a lot more budget in the mix than there was today. And we basically funded the business through credit cards. I mean, we had no
outside
our
capital.
in-laws had given us, and my in-laws had given us an initial sort of a piece of our inheritance to invest in our first business, but we'd used all that money up on building our first prototype, if you like, on their farm, and so there was nothing left after that. And so we were basically financing the business through credit cards and the odd loan for equipment here and there, but it was brutal. I don't recommend it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: in that process, right, of financing your business through credit cards, you must have saw something. There must have been some type of magic that you saw, like, hey, there's something here. It's worth the adventure. So what was that magic, that the dot that connected for you guys?
Yeah, the demand. I think what we saw when we first put up tents at Jake's farm was people didn't necessarily want to come and stay with us at the farm. They did love the tents. And so we knew we were onto something, because people would call us and say, where did you get your tents? Like, I love those tents, because, we put beautiful imagery out on the internet. This was before the days of Instagram. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
But it was around the same kind of time as Airbnb was launching. And, we were putting great imagery out on the web, and people were finding it and discovering it and calling us up and saying, I love your tents. Like, I want them. Like, and we were like, well, you could come and stay. And they were like, no, thank you. So we realized that we had something. And that's what I always tell to entrepreneurs these days. It's like trying to understand what the core of what your customer wants is. Like, what makes a business special is always about trying to understand the elements of success. And it's the same when you buy a business or you invest in a business. Like, you're trying to understand, what is it about that business that makes it work.
What the
And
problem you're
often there's like
fundamentally
one
solving.
or yeah, exactly. There's one or two core elements that usually are like, the pièce de résistance, the thing that makes that business hum. Either it's a particular product or a particular thing. And in our case, it was our tents. The tents were like our magic formula. And, we just needed to put them in the right place because there was demand. People were interested. There was enthusiasm. We just had to figure out, what do we do with that enthusiasm? How do we make it make sense from a financial perspective?
Got it. So what was, I guess, what were you charging, right, initially? And who were your first set of customers, right? Are we talking, California hippies or Silicon Valley techies, or, what is it that
They were
following that you
your
really started?
Yeah, they were your average visitors to Yellowstone National Park. We had all sorts of people stay with us that summer, and we had three different types of tents. That first year we started, I think we charged like $89 a night for one tent type, $189 for another tent type, and $289 for another tent type. The $289 tent had a bathroom in it, so private bathroom, and the other two shared bathrooms. So there was like a communal bathroom block that you had to use. It wasn't in your tent. So it's all got a lot more refined from then. But so we were pricing ourselves from a sort of a fairly mainstream pricing point with like, you could stay in a hotel for that same price, or you could come and stay in a tent. And at the time, I didn't know if anyone would pay, over $100 for staying in a tent. I mean, that was pretty unheard of at the time that, you would pay the same price to stay in a hotel or stay in a tent. We didn't know. We didn't know whether people would do that or not.
I will tell you this: if I ever go in a tent, my wife is going to be in the $289 tent.
Well,
She,
that's what we realized pretty quickly. It was like people actually don't want the cheaper tents. They want the 289, the 389, the 489. It was like we had just barely scratched the surface of what the demand actually was. And, the business learned over the years that actually the nicer the experience, actually the more the demand.
I think you
And
can probably tell me, but I'm guessing what you learned is people are infatuated with the idea of camping, right?
yes, do not
And the
want to.
experience of it, but not the fundamentals of like being out and outside with the bugs, right? And so it's
It's
a
a
way
lot
to
of
bridge
work.
and get an experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we realized we were. We could be a bridge to the outdoors in a way that was comfortable and relatively affordable. And you could create magical memories and have campfires with your kids and make s'mores at night. And then go back to a beautiful tent with plush linens and flushing toilet and, warm bed, and not have to have service in the morning. Someone can bring you coffee in the morning, and magical. Don't have
love
to
it.
rough it.
Good team experience we'll take out. So I guess, how did you realize you had something that was starting to think bigger, right? So you had the 10 acres, you had the tents, you're getting, what point you're like, hey, maybe we start to scale this out. And what did that look like, right?
Yeah.
Who did
Growth
you
and
start
scale.
Yeah.
hiring? What was that operation?
That very first summer, when we operated our business for the first year with 25 tents in Yellowstone, we realized that very first year that actually we could scale this business. We realized, oh gosh, we could not just create one camp outside of Yellowstone, but actually we could go to other national parks and do something very similar. So it was a pretty crazy summer though, because so many things went terribly, horribly wrong. And, the product wasn't perfect, and it was our first attempt, and we'd never run a hotel before. We weren't hoteliers, didn't have a hospitality background. It was, nobody had built glamping sites before. So it wasn't like you could just go, oh, that's how you do it. You go over there and you look at how someone else is doing it and you do it. It wasn't like that. But that first summer, we knew that there was the possibility, there was the genesis of like, this could be something else. And I remember one of my guys who was working for me at the time, and he said to me towards the end of the summer, he said, do you think you'll do this again? And I said, oh yes, of course we will. And we're going to do more. And he was like, what? Are you crazy? Don't you remember how hard this was? This was awful. But yeah, that first summer we just started to think about scale and started to think about, okay, what would that take to do more than we'd already done? And, the idea of you should perfect what you've got before you think about scale. Should you make what you've got better before you do more, or should you do more and, fix it along the way? All those things started to come up.
Entrepreneur's dilemma.
Yeah, exactly. And we instinctively thought, well, we should, figure out how to do this better, but let's do more of it at the same time.
So take us through 2009 is when this started, right? That was your
Yes.
first summer in 2009. And then you've scaled the company to over $100 million,
Mhm.
right? In 2018. So just
Yeah.
talk to us about that journey, because one of the things you shared when we were originally talking, your passion is to encourage women to start thinking this way and to grow their business, right? So just, I know it's hard to talk. I mean, you could talk for hours about that one journey, but what were those big highlights that for the female listeners that are listening, that you should encourage them to take those journeys?
Yeah, well, our journey was really marred by failure, right? I mean, my best lessons were all learned from stuff that didn't go well and didn't go right. It actually took us 3 years from 2009, when we first came up with the idea of sort of creating a safari experience, to 2012 of putting the first proper camp in Yellowstone. So we had sort of 3 years there of trying to find product market fit, trying to figure out the business model, figure out what wasn't working, what people wanted, and be brave enough to adjust. And what I would say is that so often what inhibits us from building something big is settling for something that just about works. And I say that to say, we think, oh, I've built a company that does $500,000 of revenue, or I built a company that does $1 million of revenue, or $2 million of revenue, and this works, without thinking or asking the question, is there a way to do $10 million or $100 million? Like, what would that look like? And just because something just about works and you can make it profitable and you can pay yourself a good living, etc., sometimes that is the thing that is our ceiling. And I say to women all the time, it's like, don't let good be the enemy of great. Don't let something that just about works. I used to, obviously, because we built glamping camps, we used to build septic systems with every resort that we ever built. I got really good at understanding what happens to poop. But often in a septic system, the engineers would tell me, oh, it just about perks, which means the system will just about work. The system will flow. And it's like, don't settle for something that just about works. And the task and the challenge is to not just, exist with something that just about works, but go for something that absolutely shoots the lights out, because it's basically the same amount of work, right? To find something that shoots the lights out versus just about you can make a living and it's quite nice, it's quite good. Don't settle. And effectively, we figured out we had a business that just about worked, but we figured this isn't scalable. It's not, you know, we can just about make a living, etc., etc. But that's what forced us to pivot into figuring out our national park model and building much larger scale glamping resorts. Was thinking, can we do something bigger? Can we do something at scale? And failure, it's easier to do that when you're failing. It's harder to do that when you've got something that works, and trading that in for something that's better.
Complacency. I mean, that kills the entrepreneurial spirit, right? And so you see that
Yeah,
time
and I
and
don't
time
know, it's
again.
just, yeah, I don't know, it's just even complacency. I think we get stuck. It's hard to see that there could be more when you've got something that's good, or something that's working, or that you can generate enough money to live, etc. You don't need more. It's like, so why do more? And it's, I say to women all the time, it's like, building big businesses is about using your influence and your power to do something really, really great. And actually, there are very few of us who are doing that in the world. And actually, that's the reason to make more money. That's the reason to have any kind of ambition. It's like, what am I going to do with that? Because actually, making money in itself is not hugely satisfying, right?
Right.
You buy the boat, you buy the house. It's fun for 5 minutes, right? But it's not massively like rewarding. What's really rewarding is having a great sense of purpose and vision and mission and contributing and feeling fulfilled by what you do, right? And if you get to make great money at the same time as doing that, then that is the icing on the cake. But it's like, how can we think about levering ourselves for driving change, making a difference, and taking all our skills and our wisdom and our knowledge and allowing that to propel us to building a better world for everybody?
I mean, money is about influence, right? Like I said, a person with
Money
10
is
million
about
doesn't live very differently
influence.
than a person with 20, which is not different than a person with 40, right? There gets to kind of a upper bound. And from there, it's about influence and impacting the things you care about. That's really ultimately, how I see it as well.
That's it right there. It's like, and how can you use your influence to make other people's lives better and make our world better? That's it.
Love it.
I was going to ask just kind of in that. So now you get to 2018, right?
Yeah.
And so in your relationship, husband and wife, obviously somebody's the visionary, somebody's the integrator, right? Someone's in that relationship. So
Yep.
are you now stuck with how do I exit my business? And at what point
No.
did that? Okay.
No, we were not planning when we exited our business. We were not planning to exit our business. And that's the interesting thing I think about building great companies. When you build great companies, people instinctively want to buy them. People want to buy companies for all sorts of reasons, right? But if you build something great, someone's going to want it. And that's what happened to us in 2018. And an investment firm came along and could see what we had done and could see that there was still a journey and there was still plenty more national parks to go to that we hadn't developed in yet, that were blue sky for the company. And we're super excited about taking the company on the next leg of its journey.
Got it. And so maybe really quick before we kind of talk about the transaction, what were just some of the biggest impact hires that you did, right, from between 2012 to 18? Right? Was it like taking the step to get a person that, like for example, a CFO, or was it a person that built the septic tanks? Cause that was the biggest challenge. Like, what was it ultimately that you felt like this really moved the needle on the company?
Yeah, I knew after the very first year in Yellowstone that I was not a hotelier and that I did not have all the knowledge on the expertise about operating a tented hotel. I mean, nobody did in the world at that time, but effectively we needed someone who knew how to operate a hotel. So that was the first big hire we made. And we went out and hired effectively a COO who would be our chief operating officer who knew how to run hotels. And that was the best thing I ever did because it freed us up to do what we were good at, which was imagining and creating and focusing on business development, while someone else's job was to focus on, okay, how do I execute on what we've got? How do I make what we've got better? How do I put in the systems and processes that we need to run this as an efficient operating machine and create great experiences? But had expertise of having done that before. So that was key for me. And often I think for entrepreneurs in particular, we get stuck with, so this is why I love this question. It's another limiting factor, right? We get stuck by what we know and we think, well, I know what I know and I have to stay in that lane. Actually, you just have to hire what you don't know, right? You have to hire the expertise that you don't have and bring it in. And that's, a massive component of what helps any business grow and scale. And you just have to be brave enough and smart enough to hire the right people and get them in the room with you to grow something and build something extraordinary.
That's what's tough about starting a new. I mean, as an entrepreneur, right? You did it all at the beginning, and so you know how to do it, and that's where it leads to complacency. And I almost have to drill this with my partner too about like let go of things, let people do it, and they're going to do the 80% of the way you do it, and that's fine, right? But
Yeah.
it's hard
And
because
you
you
might
know
be
how to
able to
do
do
it,
things
and
better than you could do
it
them.
works, and so it's like it's a mind shift, and you
It's a
really have to
mindset.
shift how you think about it, and focus on the bigger picture. So
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's often hard to think that anyone could possibly do a better job than you could do it. But they most definitely can. And that's, I think that getting the right people on the bus to go on a journey with you is absolutely key.
I had a good mentor that told me one time it's who, not how. And he actually had me read that book, right? Just to stop thinking about, how. And no, find who can do it.
Who? Just who knows how. Who knows how, basically, is what you need. And that's what we needed. And I think often the journey is trying to figure out who is it that you need to go on the next leg of your journey? What is the expertise, and who knows who would be good at leading and executing on this next piece of the puzzle to help you go on that journey? And effectively, we don't need to be the smartest people in the room. We just need to get the smartest people in the room with us. And we need to lead those people and wrangle those people. But that's really the job, I think, of any business owner or leader, is to keep putting the right people in the room.
I think job of leaders to create more leaders.
I am forced to find smarter people because if I do not, I'm in serious trouble.
Me too.
Uh,
Me too.
Got it. So then maybe just to bring it back home for the transaction. So you
Yeah.
guys built it up for an additional 6 years. You got the COO in. You weren't really thinking of selling, and what was that initial phone call or interaction like? And at what point were you guys like, "Hey, maybe we should sell," and why? What was that motivating factor?
Yeah, we went out to raise more capital. So we had raised capital the year before. I had deployed all that capital, executed on it really, really well. And we were really growing really, really quickly. And I knew we would need to raise more capital if we were going to continue to grow. And I went out to raise more capital. And the folks that came to the table were just happened to be really interested in acquiring it from us.
Got it. And so then you just go back home to your husband and you're like, "Hey, what if instead of raising capital, we, made an exit here?" Right?
Yeah,
And did y'all see it? I guess, there's people look at exits multiple different ways, right? One way is to transition into a new role as a person. Another way
Mm.
is, hey, this will accelerate the company because we have deeper pockets, right? And,
Yeah,
I mean, kind of what was the thought process on
yeah,
y'all side?
certainly that was a big thing for us, that, actually, could we accelerate the business more by bringing people in who had a lot deeper pockets than we did? And could we, continue to see the business grow and scale by bringing in partners with different expertise, different, knowledge, wisdom? Could it take the business to a whole nother league? And it seemed like that was sort of the most obvious solution to, okay, the business needs more capital, but maybe the business also needs to professionalize itself and adapt and change and grow. And, maybe there's, at the time, we weren't thinking that there would be life for us beyond the transaction. At the time, we were still very much focused on growing the company. But it evolved. I mean, and that's, transactions do that. They evolve, and then they help you to, see the world in slightly with different eyes.
So you obviously got a term sheet, right? So this group, it sounds like it's a private equity group. They provide you a term sheet.
Yes.
And so then did you have to find somebody that was your expert to walk you guys through that? Or were you pretty much at this point, you now have this acumen to be able to manage it? How did you guys get through all
Yeah,
that?
we had legal counsel on our side because we'd already raised money before, so it wasn't wildly different than the previous raise that I'd done before. Obviously, the difference was being that we were going to take capital out of the business as opposed to putting all the capital into the business. So it wasn't wildly different for me than any previous transactions I had done, apart from the fact that there were few more lawyers at the table than there had been previously, and a few more accountants and a few more advisors. And yeah, it was quite a beast, and certainly fairly intimidating because, a lot of the language around a transaction is new. You haven't necessarily done it before, and it can be intimidating and overwhelming and scary, but that's why you hire experts, right? You hire people to help you navigate, the small print and help you understand, try and help you understand what everything means. I don't know that you ever come out of a transaction feeling like you totally understood everything that was happening all at the same time, but
That's life.
that's part of the ride.
Yeah.
So it sounds like then you guys made your exit.
Yep.
Did you stayed on for a period of time?
Did, yeah.
Okay. And then it looks like you got
I
the
remained CEO for about a year post the transaction, and fully exited in January 2020.
Fantastic. And then talk to me about this Ernst & Young award. So it sounds like
Oh,
you had been pretty amazing.
that was 2017. So prior to our transaction, I became a EY winning woman. EY selects half a dozen to 10 women a year from around the country and Canada, of women who are growing and scaling incredible businesses. And I was very privileged to have become one of them in 2017.
And quick question, and in 2019, how big was the organization? Just to kind of give,
By the
users
time I left,
perspective.
we probably had about 600 employees, including seasonal staff. And we had 7 locations. So yeah, it
Wow, you had
grown.
almost 100 people per location. Wow, I thought you were going to tell me more locations. That's a lot of people.
It's a hotel.
Yeah, it was a lot of people, well, including, probably about 100 of those corporate folks and the rest on sites. Yeah, it was a lot of people. It was a lot of people.
I mean, I'm in the property management world, and people can make it the most fun and the most difficult business in the world at the same time. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the hardest parts about growing and scaling a business, right? Is navigating, building a great company for the people who work in the company. And that's
especially hospitality. I mean, it's very people heavy in all aspects because again, we're in the property management, but it's the same idea, right? You're managing for your tenants, and it's just like, so it's all about the culture and getting the right people in the right seats. So
That's an amazing story. Amazing story. And I'm glad you shared it with us. So why don't we jump into what you're working,
what are you doing today?
Yeah, let's get onto the book. Let's talk about the good stuff, the other good stuff.
Well, yeah, but talk about the book and what else you're doing today.
Yes,
that's maybe
that's right.
Yeah, the juicy stuff. One of the things from growing and scaling under canvas that I realized was actually it was quite hard for me as a female CEO to raise capital. And the capital raising journey was challenging and difficult. And not just because I was female, but because I didn't necessarily understand the requirements or the metrics or the, what investors look for in businesses. And so it was hard to talk the same language as folks when I didn't know. It's like, playing a board game and not knowing what the rules are, right? That's kind of what it felt like trying to raise capital. I just didn't know what the rules were. So it felt difficult to play and was difficult to play, and took me 2 or 3. We bootstrapped for a very, very long time, longer than probably was ideal for sure. And that was largely because I just wasn't particularly well networked, wasn't particularly understanding what the game was and how you played it. And what I realized was, I maybe encountered one female VC the entire time I was meeting folks trying to raise capital. And I spoke to hundreds and hundreds of folks. And that made me realize there's maybe something wrong here. There's things I don't know, which at the time I just thought was me. But But one of the things I realized post becoming an investor myself and now investing in other entrepreneurs, I realized that the things I didn't know, a lot of women don't know. And I wasn't unusual. There wasn't something especially dumb about me. It was just I was not in the realm, not living and working in the realm that many people have just grown up with and know and understand. And so I became a venture capitalist after exiting Under Canvas, and we focused on investing in female entrepreneurs, and specifically wrote a book telling about our Under Canvas journey, but also designed to help other women understand what it takes to build and scale a big business and what it takes to get funded. So the book is called Thinking Bigger, a pitch deck formula for women who want to change the world. Because I am a woman who wants to change the world, and I've been able to do that a little bit by thinking bigger. So the idea is to help other women, other entrepreneurs, think about building and scaling and thinking bigger than they do today, and practically distilling some of the rules of the game about how we get funded, how we scale a business, how we put fuel into a business to help it grow.
Using your money and influence to influence others, like we talked about, right? So
Indeed.
No, and I'm very glad you're doing that. I have a family and I have a lot of powerful women around me, and it's great to see, that. And we talk about that here at Equity Launchpad. We just had a great conference and we met a small group of females that want to go out and buy and acquire companies, and we think that it should be bigger. That room should have been half full of females and males, right? It's a big thing.
I got two daughters, and same thing. It just kind of get them, a little teaching my daughter about investing the other day. And she's like, "Whenever we're going to invest the money?" And I'm like, "Well, you got to get a little bit more to be able to buy a chair," but really getting them exposure to that. I mean, I little had that conversation with her 2 days ago. So
that's it, isn't it? It's about exposure. It's about
none of this is hard. It's just awareness.
It's awareness. It's not and knowledge, but then knowledge is power, right? And then if you have knowledge and you have opportunity, you can use it. I didn't have a lot of knowledge. And the sad reality is that all of other women don't too. And it's like we have to expose ourselves and get smarter so we can catch up and so that we can play, because there's really no reason why we can't. There's no reason why we can't buy businesses, no reason why we can't build businesses. We just, we need to sometimes just understand what the game is so that you can play it. And if you can understand what the game is, then you can play. And, it's fun. It's fun. It's fun playing the game.
Love it. No, it's a game of life. So that's that.
And then feeling comfortable taking on the risk, because, one of the things that I do find with when I speak to females about it, there is that risk trade that I think a lot of the guys have been used to playing for risk and doing these things. And I think that, it's helping them understand that, there is risk involved, but that's how we solve problems. We solve it through those.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Women are definitely generically, obviously, there are those of us who are the exception, but there's stats written about how women-led businesses take 4 times less, they borrow 4 times less money than male-led businesses, which is about risk, right? That is purely, entirely about worrying about overloading your business with capital risk by taking loans. So women typically underfund their businesses because they're worried about risk and worry about, the consequences infinitely more than men traditionally do, which is I'm sure there are so many reasons for that. But it is interesting because that is probably one of the biggest things that holds women back, the inability to take big swings and take big risks and be willing to lose, be willing to fail. That is part of the game, and we have to get better at it.
And I think it's repetition, right? Because again, if you're a woman and you have a successful company, right, you might feel imposter syndrome. And so last thing you want to do is like, well, I got this far and it's been hard and I don't want to, take on the risk and lose it all versus, as a guy, we felt we've been in that position maybe a few times because we've taken
Well,
that risk. And so
I
it's a
think
little bit of,
then,
just
yeah,
getting as the more and more women get exposed, right, they start to get more comfortable with it, right? Because Sarah took on the risk and it worked out. They can point to 50 people that took the risk and it, succeeded.
I think you're 100% right. Imposter syndrome is huge for women because there is a very big sense of like, I had to prove myself to get in the room. It's hard to be in the room. And when you're in the room, you don't want to risk messing it up, right? But inadvertently, you then do that by not taking risks. I mean, I've spoken to so many entrepreneurs, even those who have raised capital often don't want to take risks to risk the money that they just raised. And it's like, if you don't take some big swings and you don't take risks, you are going to lose the money you just raised because your business is going to fail. And it's a double-edged sword. And you're quite right. It's hard to get in the room, and then you don't want to lose your spot. You don't want to mess it up. But you're right. That's why I tell my story. And because if we can see it, we can be it. And we've got to take big risks and recognize that failure is part of the journey of eventually succeeding.
I love it. And that is fantastic.
Absolutely. Awesome story.
Well, Sarah, we're going to jump into our rocket round. But before we do that, just where can people, the name of the book one more time is
Thinking Bigger, a pitch deck formula for women who want to change the world. It's available for pre-order on Amazon right now. And you can also get in touch with me through my website, sarahhdusek.com.
All right. And we'll put that in the show notes for the listeners. In case you want to go through the rocket round.
All right. So our rocket round for the listeners, we always ask 3 questions to get to know our guest much better. And usually they're not about business, right? But it is a little bit about business. Everything's it. So quick first question is, what do you like to do in your free time, Sarah? Besides changing the world.
Travel.
I love to travel. I am an obsessive, absolute travel junkie.
Nomad is what I was telling her. And you want to share to the audience where you are right now?
I'm in Cape Town, South Africa.
South Africa. Awesome. All right. Next question. What was the most memorable moment in your business journey?
Oh, easy. Our first year in Yellowstone, we had a massive storm roll in and completely flatten the camp. And it looked like our business was done. We were over. We were wiped out. I mean, like a hurricane comes in and wipes a city out. That's what it felt like with this massive storm coming in and completely wiping out our camp. And we often say now that if we manage to survive that and come back from a really big storm, and if we can survive that, we can do anything. So it was very memorable for all the wrong reasons, but it was pretty wild.
It's your Hurricane Harvey. And actually, quick question. Did you guys coin the term glamping?
No, I cannot take credit for that. I don't know where it came from, but it was already in use by the time that we'd started our business.
Okay. All right, Sarah. So what is your favorite business tool or any type of tool or resource that you like to use?
Well, it's not really a business tool, but I have discovered in the last year that cold plunging is really good for me.
You're one of those cold plungers that I could do just about anything in life.
I never would have said I would be. I hate the cold. I don't love being cold, but I will tell you, there is something pretty darn magical about getting your brain to stop for about 5 minutes. Because when you're in freezing cold water, it's like it turns your brain off. It's like a reset button. You can't have all the same crazy thoughts you were having before when you plunge yourself into cold water and then are gasping for breath. And you have to learn to calm yourself. You have to learn to breathe. And you have to learn to be able to sort of find rest in the midst of quite extreme physical distress. And if you can do that in cold water, the trick then is you can do it out of cold water, right? And that's what's magical about that for me. It teaches you how to reset yourself on a daily basis without the cold water, but it's an amazing tool for a reset.
I should give it a fair chance because I'm the guy that takes, if it's a cold pool, everybody will be swimming and
I
I need about
know.
20 minutes to slowly get like another
I
inch,
was
another inch,
you.
another inch.
I am you. I am you. I'm telling you, I was you. But I really love being able to turn a crazy, like very busy brain off and
Probably what I need.
find and most of us need, right? That's the reality. Most of us who are go, 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 have always got a million things on the agenda. Stress can like build up, build up, build up. It's an amazing tool for me to just find some silence and some peace and some rest. And actually that internally is very healthy for us.
Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show. And maybe one last thing, any last parting words of wisdom for our listeners?
Oh, think bigger, ladies and gentlemen. Don't hold back because your dreams could just change the world.
Thank you very much.
Incredible advice. Sarah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the M&A Launchpad Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast and would like to support us, please leave us a rating and a review after you listen. I'm Casey Minshew, and I look forward to talking with you next week.